Welcome back through the discussion Federal Identity Governance, sponsored by SailPoint on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guest today is Kevin Cunningham, Chief Strategy Officer and founder of SailPoint. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. You know, when you go to buy a car, you just have to fill out this pieces of paper and they give you some kind of information on your credit score.
Right.
And I imagine that there's ways to look at someone's identity and try to figure out if there's a risk score involved in that. Now, does your company do something with risk score, doesn't it?
Very much so. So much like my credit score is based on a number of aspects of my spending and borrowing history. So my current loan balances, what my payment history has been, whether I'm a good risk or not, all add up to a credit score that we're all familiar with. Likewise, an individual could have a risk score. That's something that's calculated by our system. And you can include, there's a set of factors that go into that in terms of what do you have access to? When was the last time someone reviewed that access? Are you a habitual policy violator? Have you gone through your security training? And just is an extensible model. So you can add any number of attributes to that. And at the end of the day, you end up with a risk score per individual. What that allows organizations to do is segment their populations not just by geography or function or department, but truly by the potential risk they represent if their identity was compromised. So what you want to do ideally is wrap tight controls around the people that represent the most risk to the organization, and you can lessen the controls to people who represent very little risk. So not only do you improve your security posture, but you actually gain a lot of efficiencies by not worrying so much about people who at the end of the day don't represent a whole lot of risk to you.
And it goes back to humans managing all this information. I mean, there's too many people coming and going to manage all this. If there's some kind of a profile or some kind of an actuarial table you have for risk, it makes it a lot easier to assign levels of permission.
It is a lot about scale. There becomes a point in time when you get more than a couple thousand identities you're trying to manage and more than a handful of applications, and it truly becomes unmanageable to do on a manual basis.
I had a fellow from Cloudera call me and talk to me the other day, and I'm thinking about Hadoop and big data, all this data coming in and managing that. I have another friend who runs a Microsoft company, partner, and he deals with hybrid SharePoint. Everyone's sharing everything. There's so much data out there. It's not a garden hose, it's a fire hose. It's almost a tsunami. It's how do you structure it all and how do you give access to what? There's just so much information coming in now from IoT, from satellites, from just walking around. How do you structure? How do you give access to what?
That's a great question, John. And in fact, the proliferation of data, especially in the form of what we call unstructured data, that's data that lives outside of applications and databases, is happening at an amazing rate. In fact, it's estimated that up to 90% of an organization's data is now in this unstructured format. Why is that? To your point, we like to share information. It helps us be more productive. It helps us collaborate more with other people. And so we tend to share a lot of information on a regular basis. The challenge and problem associated with that is a lot of times this information is sensitive. It's information that's been pulled out of a database or pulled out of an application, not in a malicious manner, but in the name of productivity and collaboration. I want to share a file with you, John, so I'll put it up on Dropbox. There it is, John, go have at it, right? The problem is nobody knows what's really out there anymore because it has proliferated so quickly. Nobody knows whether it contains sensitive information or not. Nobody knows who has access to it or by what means they're getting that access, and nobody knows who owns it. So next major step, once you have your kind of core identity environment under control in terms of who has access to what applications and databases, is to attack this unstructured problem. I've yet to talk to a CIO or a CISO who doesn't readily acknowledge that this is a big issue for them, that they're not quite sure what to do with it right now, but they know it's out there. They know it's a pending risk for them.
I go to a lot of trade shows. If I go to a cybersecurity trade show, they talk about analytics. If I go to a data center trade show, they talk about analytics. I imagine there's analytics involved in identity as well. So you must be in a position where we can look at trends and look at certain profiles where risks are more apparent than they may not be to other people.
Absolutely. So we're introducing actually this month a new product called Identity AI, which is all about identity analytics. And the core value proposition there for customers is it helps them identify anomalies, right? Strangeness in behaviors or strangeness in patterns of access. So through machine learning and peer group analysis, we can actually determine what looks right and what looks odd. So a lot of security today is about finding the needle in the haystack. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of data, as you pointed out, a lot of people involved in the system. A lot of it is perfectly harmless. It doesn't represent any risk to an organization at all. So it's really about finding and pinpointing that anomalous condition or behavior that would indicate that something is awry, something that needs to be taken a harder look at.
It's almost out of the range of a human to do. How can a human do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when they have people traveling and remote workers? You have to automate it somehow.
You can't do it. And this is why the core of that solution is based on machine learning, artificial intelligence, because there's a lot of data to crunch through, and you couldn't get through it manually. So it is the new frontier for identity management, to automate a lot of that and help people really pinpoint risk. And as I said before, the flip side of that is to help them automate those things that don't represent risk. So the flip side of understanding where that needle is understanding where the hay is, and automate those things that have previously been more manual in nature.
I was talking to a friend of mine named Claude. He talked about an app, and I should try this and try that. Well, many times productivity can be increased and improved with new technology, but the problem is in the federal government, you just can't just try a new app. You have to do it within an environment of security. And I think identity management can help with adopting new technology, can it?
Absolutely. So basically, the more we get our IT groups and security groups involved in the process of that application adoption, it can be done in a secure fashion, right? Because maybe there's some applications that should be on the no-fly list. They don't have enough internal security to make an organization feel comfortable, and that has to be vetted before that application is adopted. It's up to the IT groups, though, the IT operations groups, to make sure they do that in a way that's responsive to the business, right? We can't talk about weeks and months of delay before that vetting is done. So we have to be responsive as a community to our business users to make sure we're not holding them up. But at the same time, the business community has to recognize that they have a responsibility to make sure they're engaging with their security and IT brethren to make sure that they're not doing something that's going to create risk in the environment.
And if you're with an organization like FEMA, and let's say the situation arises where maybe your privileges might have to dynamically increase or scale up and down, doing that manually you'd show up too late for the event.
Absolutely.
And so automating privilege escalation has got to be done by using artificial intelligence. I would think, how else can you do it?
No, you can't. You just can't do it manually. There's a lot of inefficiencies that just come along with the manual processes, and there's a lot of errors that come along with manual processes as well. We're not perfect human beings, so we make mistakes, and we give people the wrong access, or we don't get them access to what they need to be productive. So really, it is through automation is a key to modern day identity management.
I went to your Twitter feed and I saw hashtag RBAC. Back years ago, remember taking the test?
Role-based access control.
Right. This is role-based access control on steroids.
It is.
Or applied with artificial intelligence.
It is, but I think with a more pragmatic approach. So I think one of the challenges with role-based access control historically has been it's been a kind of a boil the ocean type project, right? Where you're trying to assign a unique role for every type of function in an organization. And you can get kind of mired down in that because in today's fluid environments, you need to have a lot of flexibility. So you have to have a flexible role model to accommodate that.
I'd like to thank today's guest, Kevin Cunningham, Chief Strategy Officer and Founder, SailPoint. I'm John Gilroy on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Identity Governance.